Okay, in chapter 44 here, we're going to talk about osmoregulation and excretion. And the main idea is that all animals are going to have to excrete some type of nitrogenous waste product as a result of protein breakdown. And they're also going to have to kind of balance the water according to the needs of their body and the environment and stuff like that. And they do that by kind of regulating the amount of water that's excreted through their kidneys, and as well as maintaining the solute concentration dissolved in the blood and of course in the urine, how watery it is and so forth. Okay, so osmoregulation is the process by which animals are going to regulate the solute concentration and maintain that water balance in their bodies. Okay, so when it's really dry or they're in a really hot type of an environment, then they're going to want to conserve the water. If water is readily available, they've drank a lot of water, then they want to keep that solute balance, at the right set point inside their body and get rid of that excess water. And excretion is how the animals are going to get rid of those nitrogenous waste products. Okay, so some of the terms that are probably familiar with us from last year are isotonic or isoosmotic, and this is where the situation is kind of an imbalance, so to speak, in that there is the same amount of water in dissolved solutes on one side of the membrane as there is on the other. So there's no net flow of water. The water's still moving across the membrane, but however much is going out is balanced by the amount coming in. And then you have hypoosmotic or hypotonic, and this is where the solutions on one side of the membrane are more dilute than others. So you can think of like a good hypotonic, or hypoosmotic type of a solution as being distilled water compared to the intracellular concentrations. And then a hyperosmotic or a hypertonic solution is one where the solutions have a high concentration of dissolved solutes in them. So you can think of it like the corn syrup that we used, or a very salty water, or very sugary water solution that we used. Okay, so there's two basic ways in which these solutions are two basic, I guess, solutions to the problem of managing your water loss. You can either become an osmoconformer, and that's where you're going to kind of have no net gain or loss of water. You're just going to become isotonic or isoosmotic with your surroundings. And this is only available to marine animals, those that live in the ocean. And then you can also become an osmoregulator, which is what we are. And you can control the osmolarity of your body fluids when they're different than those in the surroundings. So you can think of terrestrial types of animals, freshwater animals, and then of course some marine water animals are also osmoregulators. Okay? So osmoregulation, what this is going to require is energy expenditure. It's going to be metabolic energy in the form of ATP, and that's what is going to happen if you want to conform to your surroundings. So generally about 5% of your metabolic rate is going to be used for regulating the osmolarity. And if you're in a very salty environment, a marsh, brackish water, things like that, you might use up to 30% of your metabolic energy just to maintain those water balance. And the ultimate goal basically is to maintain the composition of the cytoplasm or the cellular fluid inside the cells. And many animals do this by maintaining or managing the internal body fluids. So some animals have an open circulatory system, and they have a fluid kind of bathing their tissues called hemolymph. So you can think of like insects. If you step on a bug and it cracks and squishes, there's generally no blood. It's just kind of like a clearish ooze that comes out, and that's the hemolymph. And then you have animals that have a closed type of a circulatory system, and then their cells are bathed in interstitial fluid, and you can think of various types of animals. Okay, many animals have a specialized epithelial type of cells kind of lining the transport epithelium, for instance, where the fluid can get in and out across the membrane, and it allows you to regulate really the dissolved solute concentrations. And these epithelial tissues can move certain solutes in certain directions. Okay, and a lot of times that epithelial types of tissue, for instance, the stuff that makes up the things that we're going to talk about with the kidney here in a little while, have these impermeable tight junctions that are going to separate the cells. So in other words, they're not going to allow the fluid to move back and forth across particular parts of the membrane. And a lot of the animals that we're going to be discussing here have this specialized types of epithelial tissues, kind of organized into these very extensive and elaborate tubular networks. And you can think of like the nephron that we'll talk about soon and so forth. And what this does is it greatly increases the amount of surface area inside that particular organ that has it. And these tubes are connected to the outside of the body through some sort of an opening, for instance, in your urethra. Okay? And the metabolic waste that you're producing by the animal are going to get dissolved in the water before they get eliminated, and they're going to get converted into something less toxic, generally speaking. Okay, and this is often coming, as we said earlier, at some sort of a metabolic cost. So the products of the nitrogen breakdown, for instance, these are the important types of items that we want to eliminate. So if you think about back to when we discussed the idea of amino acids here, you've got a carboxyl group attached to this central carbon atom, and then you've got an amino group attached to this central carbon atom that's got a hydrogen on it, and then the R group or the radical there. And this amino group here, this is where this nitrogen is coming from, and that's what's going to produce the toxic compound that we're going to want to get rid of in the form of, urea or something like that. And this is the thing that needs to get broken down. So when our body is digesting proteins that we've eaten, the urea or the nitrogen portion of the amino acid as the result of digestion, that's the part that we're going to want to eliminate. And when this NH2, the amino group, gets broken off the amino acid, we're going to form some ammonia. Okay, and this NH3 here that we've got, this is what's really the most toxic. And the thing is it's very soluble, so we can convert it easily into something else. We can transport it around the circulatory system and then get rid of it. And ammonia is the easiest thing really to get rid of. And if you're living in a really watery environment like a fish does, then you can just get rid of the ammonia right away, more or less. And terrestrial animals, don't have as much access to the water as a fish would in a freshwater type of a system. So they're going to convert it to urea, as you'll see. And birds don't want to carry around all the excess water, so what they're going to do, which requires less water, is they're going to make this uric acid. So that, bird poop, for instance, is real pasty and chalky, and that's really because it's a uric acid type of a paste. And so, as a result of breaking down these proteins, amino acids, and the nitrogen metabolism, you have to have access in some capacity to water. Okay, so as far as terrestrial animals are concerned, to get around the toxicity of the ammonia, what they're going to do is they're going to convert the nitrogen waste products into what's known as urea, and it's less toxic than ammonia, but it still requires ample water in order to get rid of it. It's less toxic than ammonia, and less toxic really than the uric acid that we'll be talking about. But you can see the equation down here. Here's the ammonia that we were talking about coming from the amino acid, and then we're going to combine it with CO2, and then this is what's going to give us the urea, and that's the part that we're going to excrete from our kidneys. Okay, so the circulatory system will carry the waste to the kidneys. The kidneys are going to really, be involved in really taking the good stuff out of the blood and reabsorbing it, getting rid of the excess water if there is any, as well as the urea and the other products of the nitrogen breakdown that are toxic to us. The main disadvantage, however, is it requires a lot of metabolic energy, not only to get rid of it, but also to convert that ammonia to urea. Some animals, as I said, like birds, create a uric acid paste. Some insects do this. The advantage, of course, is you do not need a lot of water, and of course that's going to be an advantage to a flying organism. They don't want to carry the excess weight of the water, but the disadvantage is that it requires a lot of metabolic energy in order to get all of the water out that you can, while still maintaining the ability to get rid of that waste. Okay, so the waste elimination and the evolutionary lineage, we'll pick up with this, and we'll talk about giving a couple of examples here in a few minutes. So if you had any questions, make sure you write them down, and we'll talk to you soon.